Hi everybody and welcome back to this new video series. In this video series, I'm going to be looking at some cool things you can do to automatically generate Word documents using a couple of different technologies. Specifically, we will be looking at how to generate XML queries in Oracle. We will also look at how to set up a web API that can connect to Oracle and run those queries. We're also going to be looking at how to have a front-end client such as Blazor WebAssembly talking to this web API that is going to call Oracle and run queries against its database to generate the data for the document generation. So we're going to be looking at quite a bit of things in here, and I'll try not to drag it out too long, but on the other hand, there are a lot of different aspects to generating these documents. And specifically, we are going to be using XML because in 2007, the Office suite and the standard that was generated at that time, it was no longer binary formats for things like Excel workbooks and Word documents and so forth. There was a new standard coming along that was called OpenXML. And I have used this technology quite successfully over several years. Many years ago, actually, I started this. And I have generated thousands upon thousands of documents using this technique. So this is a really useful technique to know. And I'll try to do my best to explain it to you. And it can be used for generating Excel documents, presentations, and PowerPoint. You can automate those. There's a lot of use cases for this. In particular, we are going to be looking at just the basic generation. In this case, I'm going to be looking at how you can document your Oracle database schema using Word documents. In other words, it's going to populate this document with data from Oracle relating to this schema and its object. So it will serve as a starting point for this kind of technology. In later videos, maybe we'll look at how you can generate invoices, how you can generate contracts, like legal contracts, using templates. And the reason for you want to use this particular technique is that you don't want to write everything from scratch, because typically, in a lot of legal documents, they are very lengthy. They could be like 30 or 40 pages long. And a lot of the language is kind of fixed, but when you want to address it to an individual, like you do in a contract where you have the name, address, phone number, etc., it probably is very useful to use this technique for that kind of purpose. So hopefully we'll cover quite a bit of ground, and hopefully I don't drag it out too long. But this is really useful stuff. So dig in, and you're going to learn a lot of new stuff relating to Oracle, relating to web APIs, and relating to Blazor in the front end as a client. So kick back and enjoy this video. All right, so now let's take a look at the app and see what it does. So I'm going to fire it up, and I have both projects starting at the same time, so it takes a few seconds. Here is the web API first. No, this is the Blazor. And the web API should be here too. So let's just look at the Blazor. I have my themes, as you can see. I can change it to whatever I want. So I have this generate document, and let me put it to dark default. So I'll go here, and this is what my stuff looks like. So I have this edit form that looks like this. I have placeholders in the text, and I can toggle between showing the summary or not. So let me put it in blue. So what happens is I can say, for example, one here, and when I tab out of it, you can see that nothing happens. If I try to submit it, you can see here I'm getting a summary up here. It's all in red, and those are the problem areas for this form to be validated. And I also get it per line, as you can see down here. And so I did it both ways. One thing is, if you prefer this format, you can just show it. And if you don't want to see it, you can do it like this. And you can just keep filling in. So for example, we got the demo schema. And as you can see, it disappears once I fill it in. And I also have some limitations on how long you can make it. For example, If I type more than 30 characters here like this and try to get out of it, you can see it also tests for number of characters in its string. So it can have no more than 30 according to this. So I'm just going to leave it like this. Let's call the actual password demo 2023. I don't have a click button so you can view it here, but I have to write some JavaScript, I believe, to make that happen. So here's the database. I should have just left that at default instead of the demo here. The application name, I'm just going to call it the same, demo. Some of these goes into the user document, and some of them is just I'm passing in to build the connection string. So the version, again, goes to the document, version 1. And here is you write an introduction. I'm using a text area, so it allows me to type up to about 1,000 characters. You can see introduction is required. I tab out of it and it goes away, and I want to have my name here perhaps. Right now it's ready, and I can show, there's nothing to show, so it doesn't show up. If I remove it and show it, you can see there's the schema, and schema shows up here again. So it's quite nice to have that validation in place. Now I have onSubmit. When I submit it now, it will run the onSubmit successful function and then fire off the call to the database. So I'm going to run that now and see what happens. So I'm submitting it, and it's running, and it will probably take a second here. And it failed to open my connection, so I have to check my listener, and I'll be back. Okay, so it finished. Let me show you my project here. So here you can see, here's my project for the web API. And you can see here, it built another folder down here for today. Today is the 14th of June. And you can see here, it put in the XML. This is the generated XML from Oracle, as you can see. And it has all the sections for database, app info tables, and individual tables with constraints and so forth. And here's the final document that it produced. And let's take a look at that. It's called Document Builder when you put together more than one part for the document. So I have a title page and then the body. The building of the body is called the Document Assembler. So that's what we're looking at here. It has some tables and some acronyms. And then, of course, it builds this dynamically in as well. And as you can see, we have all the tables, the constraints and columns. And some objects doesn't have constraints, so it returns an error like this. And you can just delete those out of your document. So anyways, that's the app in Visual Studio, and because that's a lot easier than try to work with code, I think, when it comes to these projects. I basically created two projects. I went with this ASP.NET Core Web API, and you click on it, and you go next, and then you give it a name, and you go next. And then the settings was just configure for HTTPS. Use controllers, which is fine because I want to use controllers. And when you set this enable open API support, it will include the Swagger. So it would be the swashbuckle stuff. That means you can test your application, as you develop it. So it's a very useful thing. So make sure you check these two if you're going to do it this way. And the other project, I went in and I said, create new project. And this was an add-on to the solution I have. So let me just show you how you create this Blazor one. You choose this Blazor WebAssembly, say next. And then this one comes with a name and say next. And then it only has configure for HTTPS set by default. And that's the way you can leave it, which is fine. You don't have to do anything else. So I'm closing this. Now, what does my project look like? Well, once you create one of them, you get a solution. And then to the solution, you simply add a project, right? So you go say add, new project, and then you choose, the Blazor, for example, like I just showed you. This is what the queries will look like. So I create a with CTE, common table expression tables, as, and then I have a basic query that gets the table name, column name, and so forth from the user tab columns. And then I join it to these all objects, and I join it on this particular field. And then I have some additional where the owner is demo and so forth. So this gets populated dynamically inside that query the query builder, if you will. If you look at that, you can see I add the schema stuff in here. The bottom line is when I actually run this stuff, and it uses XML syntax from Oracle, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time and try to explain that, because there's, you know, can create elements, you can create attributes, you can use aggregations, like when you go through several of them, you know, like you want to build a list or so forth. So there's a lot of stuff to it here. So if I'm going to run this, let me see if I actually can run it. So I'm running it, and here you can see the output. So now whether this is complete or not, I don't think so, because it cuts it off, as you can see. So in order for it to be completed, you probably have to run it through an application like I just did, because this is not going to really do it. And I think it's because I've created a club out of it too. So what happens if I don't use this one? I don't know. Let me see if it runs now. It did something here. I don't know exactly what it did, but it looks a little more complete now. So as you can see, it produces a bunch of XML here, and this is what it gave me. So bottom line is I do one of these queries for every type of object that I'm looking for: sequences, views, tables, etc. So that's the same principle I use over and over for. And you can add your own if you want to do. But obviously you got to figure out how to set up this XML stuff in Oracle. Okay, so let us take a look at the Blazor client that I'm using here. I'm gonna open up my project again here and maximize it. So here is the web API, so I close that. And here is the Blazor app right here. So it's pretty straightforward, and I'm not going to spend way too much time on this. I have some other videos where I built an OpenAI client in Blazor, and it has a lot of these details in there that I explained. So without repeating myself too much, I'm just going to show you very quickly what I got here. So I just have the regular package references that comes with the project, nothing special here. I have in the app CSS, I use my own CSS so I can have different themes. And I basically set references to variables, so I can load variables. For example, here you can see I have a dark mode, I have a light mode, I have blue mode, and so forth. And I basically create all these properties here with different colors. And then I can refer to these guys in my CSS behind the pages. So this is the page I'm using, this doc build eraser. And if you look here, here is the CSS that I'm using in that page. And as you can see, this is what I'm talking about. You're referring to the variable that sits in the app CSS up here. So this is the background color for that one. So whatever you have chosen at the time in your main layout page, because I have code in here that toggles these dark and light mode and red mode and what have you. So as you can see here, unchanged in the select here, whenever you choose a new theme, I'm calling this function here, and then I have a bind variable that tells me which one has been selected. And down here you can see, here's the code that makes that happen. So without going through this again, check out my previous videos in the Blazor OpenAI series that I created. There you can see how I did a lot more of this CSS stuff and the code that changes these themes. The actual edit form that I'm using in the Blazor WebAssembly page. As you can see here, here is the, if it's valid, you submit it, unform valid, unform invalid. And this is important that you set some kind of class reference here as a model. And in my case, that app info is being created right here, where I'm referring to a class called app info in all uppercase. And I'm setting only one of the values directly here for the database. And what I really should be doing is the database itself and set it XE pluggable database 1 type of thing. All right, so here you can see I'm sending reference to that class, and that class, like I said before, you can find that in the shared folder. Here's that class. And you set a reference to the system component model data annotations. You create your class here. Then you have your required error message, Here's a display format. If you have dates, you can use this. I'm not using this particular field. I'm just showing this. You can also use regular expressions in this. You can see here the username is required. The length can only be 30. And here's the error message. So it will basically test for both of these. And it will run this one first. And then if that one is satisfied, we'll run this check as well. So as you can see, you decorate these and you can set string lengths. You can also set up ranges. So if you have, for example, one field that is numeric and you can only have from 1 to 100, you can set the range to be 1, 100 to indicate that. And you can decorate it just like this, like range object like that. Now, what you can do is you can grab any Word document and you can copy it and paste it somewhere, maybe right below here. And what you want to do is you want to rename it and you want to say .zip, because all OpenXML documents, this is true for PowerPoint, this is true for Excel, every one of them is really a zip file. So even though it appears with the docx extension here, it's really a zip file. So when you open up the zip file, it has parts. You can see these different folders here. And you have one for Word, and you can see inside each one of these folders, there's relationships listed. So this one here is indicating the relationship between all these parts. And then you have, for example, the document XML. You can see it's plain vanilla XML. So when you look at it, this is a Word document. It's an XML document. And you can see it has a W that is an alias for this namespace here. So when you look at each part here, you can see the body of your Word document. You can see a paragraph, and it's prefixed with this this namespace alias W for Word, right? So you can say this is a Word type of element, and it's a paragraph. So basically what happens is you can see, for example, here I got a document open, and inside the document.xml, you can see here is a W, the prefix for the word, which is that alias. But this is a content control. And remember, what we're trying to do is we decorate our text that we want to change with a content control. This is a content control, as you can see. Here's the content, and then there's the end of the content down here, as you can see. Inside this content control, you can see you have a paragraph, and it has a reference because they link all these parts together with reference IDs. And I don't know what all this other stuff is, and I don't really care. But this is what we call a run. Now, why there's a run? In Word and in Excel or what have you, let's say you go in and you highlight part of text and you make it bold. Now, how do you think the XML for that will work? Well, because part of it is formatted, part is not. The way they do it is they do this run. They create a run like this, and they might only have part of the word. And then they create another run like this. And then whatever part of the text is part of that run, they stick in here. So you get the word namespace and then the T for text. So if you look at this content control, it makes perfect sense. This is a table content control. So the idea for that one is table space select, okay, equals, and here is the equal. And here is the XPath orders/order. So you're kind of drilling into this one. But here's my point. My point is that we want to replace all this stuff with our own text coming from an XML document. So the bottom line is it's a zip file. It has many parts. It's written in XML, and hence the word OpenXML. And what we're trying to do is manipulate this stuff and replace all these content controls with our text coming from an XML document. You can download this OpenXML tools. So it's called OpenXML Power Tools. And here you can see all the code that goes into that one. And you can find that if you go to GitHub. Let me see where I did this. So if you look, you can go here, and here is Eric White's OpenXML Power Tools, and you can just download it as a zip and put it somewhere if you want to, or you can use Git, whatever you prefer. And this is just something I want to point out very quickly. It's going to go and find all these paragraphs and all these elements, and there's something called a PA, as you can see. So if I drill into this PA class here, these are the kind of content controls you can create. So one of them is like content, and one of them is select. So you have like content select. That's the one you use for just like a little word or something like that. If you're going to create a table, you use table select. And then if you want a repeater control, that's going to have like a paragraph repeating over and over and over and over again, maybe with different type of text, you can use the repeater control. And of course you have end repeat that you decorate below the stuff you want to repeat. And there's also something called conditional. Conditional means like you can set to match or not match. So if you decorate some text, a paragraph or two paragraphs or what have you, with a conditional space match equals to true or false, then if your XML has a variable in there that says true or false, and that's the one you're mapping to in this control, then it will either show up or it will not be created in the document. So that's how you use the conditional. And again, check out his videos. He will show you examples of how to do this. And of course, you got end conditional at the end. I never used this depth there, and I don't think I ever used this one optional either. So I don't know what that does. But here you can see these are the kind of content controls you can probably create. The rest of this stuff is basically replacing, you can see here content, there's the table. It will replace those with these XML fragments, and then it will populate with whatever word you put in. So that's how this is structured. And there's a gazillion things in here. There are document assembler, which is what we use for the XPath. And then you have document builder, where you put one or two or three documents together. We use part of this for the title page and our body. But then you have all kinds of other stuff here, like you have pivot tables for Excel. There's HTML stuff. You can convert Word documents into HTML and so forth. So take a look at that if you're interested in learning more about this. But I just want to mention this because this is kind of where we're going with this. All right, so I did a search online, and I was looking for an employee table in Oracle, and it came over this script, and I just grabbed the whole script and I placed it into a file, as you can see in front of me here. And if you look at it, it has like departments and some location IDs and countries and blah, blah, blah. And there's a bunch of insert statements for employees. And then towards the end, it writes like comments on a column. So that's kind of nice because when we're going to document this, we have some comments we can display in our document as well. So that's kind of cool because that describes our table in more details. Now, there's another way you can comment in here on a schema and so forth, but we won't look at that just yet. However, this script, I ran this script. One thing I want to show you is that if you think about it, because I have both my projects in the same solution, when I fire up the Blazor app, I kind of want the web API to be running at the same time. So, but that's not dead, and Blazor tries to call it and nothing happens because it's not running. So the way you can do that, you go to Solution, you go right-click, you go to Properties, and if you look here, Startup Projects, notice you can choose multiple startup projects like this. And I say Start the Blazor app, Start the Web API. So at this point, they both start up at the same time. Now, initially when you run it with the debugger, it's a little slower. But when it gets to production kind of thing, and your code is compiled, it will run much faster. But you can choose whether you want to debug it or not. But it takes a little more time when you have both of them starting. But I just want to show you this. You can actually have multiple startup projects. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is, remember, I'm running both projects. This is the Swagger portion. So this is the Web API. Notice this. It's a localhost 7209. The other one is the Blazor app, the WebAssembly app. Notice this has a different localhost 7241. So why do I mention this? Well, they both have different addresses. And because of that, you're going to have an issue with something called CORS. So it's like a cross-reference kind of thing that you have to take into account when you call one web API from like a Blazor app or whatever, if they don't have the same reference or the same address, so to speak. Just notice they have different localhost numbers, 7241 for the Blazor. Okay, let's take a look at the data.xml file and see what's going on in there. As you can see, you have tables, that's the root tag, and then you have one table here, next table here, and so forth. Notice inside each table, I give it the name using an attribute ID, and then I have a comments section and a constraints section, and then I list all the columns. You can see. So those mappings, whenever you drill into table, and then you're going to find comments and comment like this. So if you remember from a Word document here, you can see tables, table, and then the ID will be the name of the table, comments, comment, and whatever that text is will be the attribute. So that's how you drill into these XML documents. Now, what I'm showing you here is the key, because without these assemblies, you're not going to be able to do this. And if you look, I have one reference to the document format OpenXML version 2.2. So if I open my tools, if I go to NuGet and I choose the NuGet manager here, and let me just show you this. The references I had, so you can see is document format OpenXML. So what you do is you go here, you say document format, right? OpenXML, and it shows up a bunch of stuff here. So document format OpenXML 2.20.0. That's the one you want. But one thing you're going to need is the OpenXML power tools, and probably, if you're going to follow me, you're going to need newtonsoft.json. To get the power tools, you go into your NuGet and you paste it in, and it searches. And right here, by Eric White, as you can see, this is the one you want. It's version 4.5.3.2. The other one you want, if you're going to work with Oracle, you want to get a connection to Oracle database. The best one to use is not the Microsoft version, but it's the Oracle version. It's oracle.manageddataaccess.core. Make sure it's the one for the core, 3.21.100. And I think it comes with this one because you had that check mark when you created this project. Okay, so that takes care of what you need in the project for the web API. Now the Blazor component, it generates a WebAssembly project, and you've probably seen these before if you watch my videos. It has like a shared folder, pages folder, etc. And if you recall from when I did my OpenAI stuff, I added like CSS files directly to the pages themselves by giving the same name and then the extension. So you can see here I got a CSS file that is specifically for this guy. All right. So the way I work with this is that I'm going to have one page, and it's going to be called Doc Builder, and that's the one that's going to call my web API. So with that said, let us first do the web API. So we're going to connect the web API to the Oracle. And you need to have a connection string set up. And the way I did that was to simply set it up like this. But because I'm doing a database design document, I don't know which database I'm going to connect to. So I don't want to hard code it. So what I do instead, I set up this DB dynamic connection. And then I simply replace the critical parameters here. Like the critical parameter in my case is going to be the service name, which is going to be this. It's also going to be the schema I'm going to cover, which is going to be this in my case, but it could be anything, right? It could be any use or any schema. And of course, the password, you're going to replace this. So I use this connection string so I can replace those values and still log into Oracle in the pluggable database. So that's how you set up the app settings JSON. Now, once you set up the app settings, the way this project works is you have templates. And I have two templates. This one is a little fixed. you could change out this and you could have some kind of image created and then some generic text like this and, you know, a footer like this. And that would be perfectly fine. It's up to you. I'll leave it up to you whether you want to create a bunch of these templates for the first page and just give them names like I did with demo here. That's up to you. Or you just ignore this all combined. That's up to you as well. This is the template that I use for a body. And it looks pretty awful when you look at it right here. What it does is it uses something called content control. So if you go to the developer here and you go to design mode, you can see here is a content control. Here is a content control. And the way that this particular OpenXML power tool, the document generator works, that what Eric White wrote, is that it uses XPath. So as you can see here, it's calling ./appinfo/app. ./appinfo/version. So inside a content control like this, here I also, inside this content control, I also have an XPath. But I changed so if you look at it, when you click here now, you can see when I select this content control here, basically what happens is it will replace the content controls with pure text when it actually compiled the document. But here you can see content is select equal to the root element and then appinfo/db. So it's going to get that value and place it in here. And then it has a formatting, as you can see, because you can format the text. Here I set it to Hettenschweiler 24. So I get a different look and feel to the document. If I look at this one, for example, you can see this is Arial 8. So you can change all this stuff yourself. You can format any way you want. And there's also a couple of other types of tabs that you should be aware of. So here we got a table select. What the table will do, it will expand. So you have one row set up here. But if it needs more, it will generate them. By the way, I got all this information here by passing in, I want descriptions from these different things in Oracle. Can you please write me a couple of paragraphs, a summary for this? And I asked ChatGPT to do it, in Bing Chat, actually. And it wrote these wonderful descriptions that I don't know where I got it from. But so I was able to just fill in this stuff with stuff from ChatGPT. And you can see PL SQL, store procedures, functions, and so forth. So once you get a little further down here, you can see you're getting into this table select. And what it's going to do is, you can see I have an at column name, at constraint name, at ref table name. Now those are attributes, okay? So in my XML, those are part of one row, and they are called attributes. They're not elements, they're attributes. But this table will keep expanding depending how many rows I got. So it will keep adding rows to it, which is kind of cool. If you're curious, do a Google search on Eric White and OpenXML, and you're going to see some old videos, but you're going to find this particular, what goes into creating these documents. And that's how I set up this template for the body. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that first document you saw, this title page, and we can combine it with a body. So we're going to build one document out of these two, basically. So that's what these templates are going to be doing for us. Now, since I already created some documents here, I'm going to show you the XML that I generate from Oracle. So if I double click here, you can see this is the kind of XML I want to have to populate this document. It's going to have like a root string here, a tag, and then it's going to start with the word database. Then it's going to call app info. And as you can see, app info is this section. It's going to go into creating what database, what app, what version are you on. And this is going to go into the document itself. You're going to write some introduction maybe. This is a demo database intro. Author is me, for example. And signature, you haven't done it yet. You haven't written the date yet. And then you start with tables. So as you can see, each table may or may not have comments, constraints, and then of course the column listings, which every table will have. But if you don't find one of them, for example, if there is no comments on the table, the code will actually make it a highlighted yellow and say couldn't find any data. So it's very useful. It doesn't crash on you or anything. It just tells you, hey, there's nothing here. So then you just go afterwards and clean it up a little bit. So that's how the XML works. But you have to build this document. And, in hindsight, that looks pretty straightforward, right? But I took some time to build this because I need to stick it in here. I can't do it in Oracle because then you have to put it in every schema you're going to be in. So I had to put it here. So what I ended up doing was I just looked at my template and I looked at what are the categories I want to document. Well, it's tables. So I created a class for tables, for triggers, for views, for sequences. And of course, you could add to this, just add another class and follow the same method that I'm doing here. So how does these classes work? For example, for database tables, I have this class called Queries. And the queries is the key to all of filling in the information for all of these. So if you open Queries, you can see I use quite a bit of string builder technique here. So here's the class queries, I should say. Here is the method get the tables XML query. And then you're passing in the schema. You create a string builder like this. And then I just have a quote string. So that means it's going to be simulating putting a quote in, etc. But as you can see here, I append line and I use with statements, as you can see, with tables, with constraints, with comments, and so forth. Now, you're not going to be able to read this, but as you can see, there's a lot of XML stuff here. So I will extract out the queries that this thing builds so you can actually see the queries and see how it's constructed. But just be aware that every one of these classes here calls this one and builds their queries this way. So this is for triggers, this is for views, and so forth. And this code is pretty much the same for every one of these classes. You create an XML element type, call it this function, if you will, and pass in the schema and the connection string. Then you basically create a value, a return value, set up a connection, create an Oracle connection like this, open the connection, create a command string, which is basically going to be that query that this query class builds for you. Then you set up a command object, an Oracle command object, do a try statement, create a reader like this, and using the reader, you read, you create a club out of it because it's going to be all text. It's going to be XML coming back. And then you dispose of the reader, and then you create an element called XViews in this case, XTables and so forth, by creating an XML element and you parsing the club, meaning the text string, so you can get into a XML format, and then you return it here. Now, who calls all these classes? Well, that's what I do. When you get to the controller here, you can see this is the landing point on the web API. It's a post, HTTP post. Here is how you set up the configuration to get the connection string, meaning that app settings JSON here, this connection string. That's how you call that. You set it up this way. Then what you do is, I'm going to be expecting 3 parameters coming into this web API, schema, password, and database. And then I just gave it a name, called it get data. All right. And then I have the actual post code logic here. So it's a from route, meaning it comes from here. The first one is the schema, the second one is the password, and then the database. They're all from route. And then the final one is from body. It's going to be the JSON object because I'm going to pass in some JSON for the app info separately from the rest of it. And then I generate this doc builder class. There's a doc generator class. And what I do is I update the schema to be uppercase because I want everything in the schema to be uppercase. Here is the connection string. That's how I retrieve it. And then I replace, because it's dynamic, connection string, as I said before. And what I do is I replace the database with whatever the database you're passing me in, and the schema you're passing me in, and the password you're passing me in from the client, meaning the Blazor app. And then I call this create doc builder create document. And this is the key function. Notice what I'm doing here. I'm setting a reference to every one of these classes. These you can see here. So if you need more, you can just keep adding this to this list. Here is the reference to that queries class down on the bottom here. And then from there, I basically have a function, a function that's going to basically build this whole structure. And again, this one, of course, comes from your web API call. And this one is, okay, that's just going into the name of the document. I'm just calling it dev here. You can change all this stuff. But notice what it does. It creates an XML element for each one of those classes. The tables, the views, the triggers, and this one does a little different one because what it does, it builds the name of the person that creates the document and all that stuff. And because I'm passing in the JSON object for this, but I need it to be an XML because the OpenXML standard requires an XML document, not a JSON document. So I have to replace this name here with an at name because it's an attribute. And therefore, the XML will not construct correctly if I don't do this. And then I use the JSON convert, and I deserialize XML node, passing in this string that I'm generating here. And then I create XML out of it, like this, an XML element, and I return it. So every one of these classes will do similar things. So if you look now, what I do is I create a timestamp for when I create this, and then I create a directory info. Basically, I'm going to build a string here that's going to replace all these guys with what's here. So it's going to be the schema, the environment in dev in this case, the year. It's going to be minus 2000. That means, for example, if it's 2023, it would simply be 23 because you're subtracting 2000. Then you have the month, the day, and then you have the hour, minute, and second. And then you create that temp directory here. You create a file info object based on the XML file, and you can combine the actual directory we just created here with, and this is the name you want to save the XML as. So that comes from this one here. So you're going to save that separately, and that's what I'm doing in my data.xml here. You can see it. So that will have information about what you created your Word document from. That's useful. Now, at least in dev it is. And here I create another template document, and I'm referring to my project here, which sits here, and I'm referring to the templates folder, this one, and the template body, which is this one here. So that's the one I want to use here. Then I create what is called a VML document. It's going to be a new one. I'm going to pass in the full name of the document I'm going to create. And it's going to go into one of these folders here, as you can see here. Now you can redo this in any way you want. You can save it to these drives, and then, like a public drive, and you have access to it, and your application runs and spools it out there. And then your application can pick up the ID and all that stuff from there and do some more stuff with it. We used to create documents like contract documents, and we pushed it into a folder. We brought down the ID and all that stuff. We stuck it in a table, and the user could go and retrieve that document, make some changes to it, and then push it to DocuSign. So DocuSign could take that, whoever the contract was for could sign it and all that stuff, and create a PDF out of it, and we could save that PDF back up into the database. So there's a lot of opportunities to use this kind of stuff. Now, in case you wonder, this document assembler, assembled document, that is kind of that OpenXML stuff. So if you drill in here, you can actually go in, but I'm not going to explain it to you. So once you get in here, this is the code we're looking at. But this is in the OpenXML Power Tools. And there are other methods there, not just for Word. You can do Excel, you can do PowerPoint presentations and all kinds of stuff. In this case, this is the one you use to assemble the document. So there's a lot of code here. It works. So you assemble the document. Here's the name of it. And you give it the name you want to append to, whatever document, like this stuff. So when it's created, you kind of like a demo final thing. The first one it creates is this one, which is this document. And the reason is because this is just a body. It doesn't have the title page. So this one has the title page plus the document. And there's some additional information here. You set the title page. You have the you create a list, source list here, where you're going to combine these two basically. And that's the title page, and that's the this one that's up here, and the body. That's going to be this one here. So you can combine these two. And this piece will validate your document. So remember I said if you run a query and it doesn't find data, it just shows up as a highlighted yellow and it says couldn't find the data. So that's what this validator will do for you. So here you build the document, passing in the combination here of the sources. And here's the directory you want to put in, which will be one of these guys. And whatever the schema is, demo dot whatever, right? And then you can see demo dot underscore final doc.x. So that's what this piece is doing. And here's when you actually combine the stuff. And here you use this code to actually finalize the whole thing. And then you do some checking if there was any errors and versus when there is not. So that's the code in the web API. Okay. So I hope you liked this video, and I will be back soon with another video. I might try some more of these OpenXML videos. Thank you for watching.